This free program is paid for by the listeners of WBAI New York. If you're not already a member, think about joining us to help keep free speech alive.
People of America,
you're listening.
This is the President of the United States. You are listening to George Galloway and the mother of all talk shows. George is a Scotsman, and like me, an Irishman. Enjoy.
Welcome once again to the mother of all talk shows with me, George Galloway. It's the 1st of June, and while it's not quite busting out all over, as Rodgers and Hammerstein had it, it's certainly filling out quite nicely, don't you think? I've been looking back at this day in history, and it's quite a spooky and eventful one, believe me. Brian Cox, the actor and second most famous man to be born in Dundee in Scotland, is 65 today. Did I mention that I was born in Dundee? Brian has been in quite a few blockbusters, The X-Men, The Bourne Supremacy, but has he ever been in a great movie? You may have an opinion. I do. I certainly have an opinion on Pat Boone, who is 77 today. Boone made his name and fortune out of covering black artists' songs at a time when there was still open segregation in the United States, and of course massively outselling the originals. Now, Boone is about as right-wing as you can find without falling off the political spectrum. 18 months ago, he compared liberals like us to cancer, calling them, us, black, filthy cells. Morgan Freeman, that wonderful actor, is 74. The film Seven, where he played a kind of detective mentor to Brad Pitt, is one of my favorites. Rolling Stones guitarist Ronnie Wood is 64 today, and here's where it turns spooky. On this day in 1964, the Stones arrived in New York for their first U.S. tour. Is there anyone out there who saw them on that tour? 11 years later, they began their first tour with the new guitarist, one Ronnie Wood. You can read all about it and more in his autobiography, which I just have. It's called Ronnie, and I wonder how he remained alive long enough to write it, never mind to remember it all. And it was on this day in 1967 that the Beatles released Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band in Britain. You Yanks had to wait a further day. June the 1st was also the day in 1792 when Kentucky became the 15th state of the United States of America, and 4 years later, Tennessee became the 16th. But as we don't have many listeners there, we'll skip over those two, although they might be listening online. In 1938 on this day, Superman, the first superhero, appeared in the first issue of Action Comics. I didn't read the 1938 edition, but I was reading it from circa 1960, I would think. But there's an altogether more grisly anniversary to commemorate, with chilling references today. In 1993, at the height of the siege of Sarajevo, 11 people died on this day after Serb forces shelled a holiday football match in the capital of Bosnia-Herzegovina. 4 children were amongst the dead. 100 were injured on the makeshift pitch in the suburb of Dobrinja. The Serb forces were, of course, then commanded by General Ratko Mladic, now in custody in The Hague and shortly to face war crime charges. I welcome his capture, and I'm sure his subsequent conviction. But I was against the NATO war against Yugoslavia, and I'll defend that decision against anyone who'd like to argue it with me. So that's the first topic on the show. Come on and argue for that intervention if you're hard enough. That's 212-219-2800. The World Health Organization claims that radiation from cell phones is a possible cancer risk. So call me on the iPhone if you're brave enough. The number is 212-219-2800. Now, just to add to the everyday health risk, it appears that carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere have reached a new peak, and this despite an economic recession. The data comes from the U.S. government's Earth Systems Research Laboratory, and it confirms what the International Energy Association also found, that carbon dioxide emissions were the highest in history. Of course, you citizens of the United States are responsible for a disproportionate amount of this problem, but around 3/4 of the emissions increase in 2010 came from developing countries led by China and India. So why shouldn't the Chinese and the Indians have the same gas guzzlers or air conditioning devices that you do, and to a slightly lesser extent, I do? Or does everyone have to cut back? And if they do, shouldn't we be leading by example? And then there's Libya, and Colonel Gaddafi still clinging to power. He must have some support or he wouldn't still be there. But Britain is now sending in Apache attack helicopters, bought from you guys. Isn't it wonderful how you call your weapons of massive destruction after the peoples of the Native Americans, whom you massively destroyed? There are British advisors in Benghazi, U.S. advisors too. They say there are no boots on the ground, but actually Benghazi is now a foreign-occupied town, and Britain's special forces, SAS men, are undoubtedly directing the fire. Now, what right do we have to intervene in Libya? None, I say. Let me have your view. 212-219-2800. 2 stars of New York's Metropolitan Opera have bowed out of a tour of Japan, citing fears of radiation from the Fukushima nuclear plant. Soprano Anna Netrebko and tenor Joseph Kaleja announced at the last minute that they would not join the tour, despite assurances they would be safe. What a pair of wusses. I'd argue that emission-free nuclear power is the future, but no doubt some of you have a different view again. 212-219-2800 if you want to put it. And Sarah Palin is on an unmagical mystery bus tour of the United States, as you've no doubt picked up on. Even I have over here. She won't tell the media where she plans to go next, but I have a few suggestions. What about Dead Horse in her own state of Alaska, or Hell in Michigan, or Hell Hole, Idaho, or maybe a permanency in Recluse, Wyoming? Let me know your thoughts on Sarah Palin and on what the Republicans are likely to do. Are they really going to pick her, or are we going to get someone even more dangerous? 212-219-2800 on these or any other matters that you want to sound off about. I've been missing for 2 weeks. I'm very glad to be back, and I really want to hear your calls. Ife, have we got anyone on the line?
Well, you know what? You gave the wrong number. It's 212-209-2900. But we do have
I was thinking that every time that I read it out. I don't know why my colleagues have given me the wrong number, and I'm very sorry to the listeners, but I'm sure they found their way to you anyway.
Yes, you have Parvis from Larchmont, New York.
Okay, Parvis, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mr. Galloway. You're my hero.
Hi there. I'm glad you got through. Sorry about the wrong number.
I remember the number. Okay. I want to say about Libya. You know, the NATO trying to hijack Arab revolution. They want to tell the Arabs, you can't do nothing without us. This is a shame. This is a shame. You see, they should win it on their own, and they could have won it if we did not interfere. The soldiers would have turned against Gaddafi. But now they're patriotic people, and they're going to fight the NATO, and Libya will become a failed state like Iraq. Shame on America. Shame on England.
Well, I think it's... I agree with your the general thrust of your point, Parvez, but I think it's a little more complicated than that. The situation in Libya is this, as far as I'm concerned. There is a huge, massive, popular revulsion at the Gaddafi dictatorship. I have always thought that he was schmuck, but it has come to the attention of Western leaders only very recently that he is. Of course, until just a couple of months ago, they were making themselves available as his best customers and best suppliers. So I speak with some authority. I've never met Gaddafi. I've never met any of his soprano-style family. I have nothing to do with his regime in any way, and I never have had. It is a brute dictatorship which has either thrown away and or stolen literally uncountable billions of dollars. Every person in Libya should be as rich as Croesus. Every person in Libya, there's only 4 million people there, should each be like a Saudi sheikh with palaces and everything that one could possibly want. But they're not, and neither is the public realm in Libya. It has been shockingly badly run and looted for many decades. But I'm still against Britain and America invading and occupying. Even more so, I'm against France and Italy invading and occupying, because they were the colonial powers who, within the lifetime of some people listening to this radio show, massacred literally millions of people in Libya and in next door Algeria. In the case of the French, the Algerians had to pay 1.5 million martyrs in order to be free of French colonial rule. And the Italian fascists, in their occupation of Libya, killed literally 30% of the entire population of the country. 1 in 3 people in Libya was murdered, massacred, by the very same Italy, which is now back in the seas, over the skies, and on the ground in Libya. Now, I don't know if the Libyan revolutionaries could have overthrown Gaddafi on their own. But here's a difficult thing to say, but it has to be said. If they couldn't overthrow Gaddafi on their own, then they would have had to retire and prepare for a time that they could. You cannot have a revolution and ask my country and your country to invade you in order to make your revolution successful. That's where I stand, Parvez. What about you?
I agree with you, but one thing I want to say, my hypothesis is this, that if the NATO did not interfere, the soldiers would have gone on the side of people.
Well, maybe. I don't think we're in a position to be definitive about that, Parvez. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. I would have liked to hope that they would, but it may be that they wouldn't. But in any case, I think we agree that's not a reason for foreign countries, the former imperial powers, invading and occupying your country, and then you call it a revolution. That's not a revolution. That's a reoccupation.
Yeah, and then the Westerners are on the front now. Amy Goodman on her show showed that there are soldiers from France, from Italy, and from England. They're there fighting with the rebels. I mean, this is not the revolution.
Yes, they are. They are, and you can no longer call them rebels. Well, you could maybe call them rebels. You certainly can't call them revolutionaries. Parvez, thanks very much for your call. Ife, notwithstanding my blunder, for which I'm not responsible, let me quickly add, do we have any other calls?
Yes, you have Charles from New York. From New High.
Hi there, Charles. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, great to hear from you. I've missed it the last couple of weeks.
Well, it's nice to have you back.
Thank you, my friend.
I was noticing your comments about tomahawks and all the other Native American references.
Tomahawks and Apaches.
Yeah,
I mean, you couldn't make it up, could you?
Sorry, I just had to drop my little girl off to daycare.
That's okay.
I just wanted to,
this is a family show.
This is somehow of an observation that I should have guessed myself, being an American, but I guess it takes an outside perspective to notice.
Well, sometimes you can see things more clearly from the other side of the water. But it's always struck me as particularly obscene that the people who were wiped out by the settlers in the United States have then called their weapons for wiping out other people after the people they wiped out.
Sure, we're guilty of a lot more co-opting than that.
Indeed, indeed. Well, look, you look after your girl, and thanks very much for calling. Ife, do we have any others? Let me give out the correct number. What is the correct number?
It's 212-209.
212-209.
2900.
2900. You see, I knew that. But for some reason, my colleagues written in big letters an entirely wrong telephone number in front of me. So, let's see who we've got.
Well, you have Joanne from Fairfield, Connecticut.
Excellent, Joanne. Very nice to hear from you.
Well, good morning and good afternoon to you out there, but I wanted to make a comment. I think that what's going on with Palin is I think she's just another freak show distraction, and I think
you don't think she's seriously preparing a run?
I don't think she'll be allowed to. I think she's trying to keep her face there, just like Donald Trump, free PR. Maybe she'll get an ambassadorship to London. Who knows? Court of St. James.
Oh, my God, not London, please.
Yes. But at any rate, I do think what's going to go on here is I think there's going to be a draft. I think it's setting it up for a draft from the convention floor of Jeb Bush, because you see Jeb Bush's father, George I, is getting up there. And I happen to know, and I've been hearing this for a long time, and I can't reveal my sources, but they've been talking about Jebby being president and they want to have this history, this legacy of the three Bushes living presidents.
Well, I'm sure they do, but it would surely be an electoral liability to run another Bush.
I think you're right, but I don't think we really control the elections anymore. I think the big guys do, and they're always vetted by corporate interests. And
you've still got the right to go into the polling station and cast your ballot, as do the more than 150, I think, million American voters. So it wouldn't do to get yourself carried away with the conspiracy theories, I must tell you, because if you think like that, then you're really saying that our rulers are all powerful and that there's nothing we can do about it, and that's not true.
Well, I agree with you on that, and I agree, and I agree that we shouldn't give up voting and all that. But I'm telling you that I think that this is what's going to go on, and I've been hearing this conversation within this Bush social group for years.
Sure, that they would like a third Bush president, I have no doubt. But that there is no chance whatsoever of bringing it about, I'm equally sure. Thanks very much indeed.
Give you $1 bet.
Let's see. Well, I'll tell you what, I am a betting man on politics, so if you'd like to lay a side wager on it, then just talk to Aoife off the air. Thanks very much, though, for your call out there in Connecticut. We want calls from New Jersey, from Connecticut, from New York, all the boroughs. So please, Aoife, keep them coming.
Here he is, comrades. George Galloway and the mother of all talk shows, guaranteed to destroy all weapons of mass deception.
Indeed. Now, that was my Russian alter ego. As you'll have heard, I've even got a sting with Tony Blair in it. Maybe that'll come up later. Well, we're talking about whatever you'd like to talk about. We didn't get much of a chance the last time I was on the air because it was fundraising Wednesday, and then I've been off the last couple of weeks for more fundraising Wednesdays, but I'm back, and I want to hear from you. So hit the phones on any subject that you'd like. Aoife, who do we have?
You have Shaka from New Jersey.
Hi, Shaka in New Jersey.
Yeah, hi, how are you doing, George?
I'm good. Which part of New Jersey are you in?
I'm in Hoboken.
Oh, Hoboken.
Across,
you know, I'd love to live there, man. I'd love to live there and just look across at the Manhattan skyline. That would be bliss for me.
Yeah, we'd love to have you. But
Thank
listen,
you, my friend.
Just a quick comment on Libya, and I'm glad you raised the subject. And I totally agree with you on the question of the rebels. I'm sure they're not revolutionaries.
Mm-hmm.
I think they sort of maneuvered or manipulated the population into something that started off as a popular uprising or demonstrations in the street, and within 1 week we were hearing about rebels with big guns and tanks and all that kind of thing. And they were not ready.
Although it took two to tango on that, Shoka, because the Libyan regime answered the people's demonstrations with an immediate militarization. But you're right, it's very odd that I mean, if you think of how many months in Yemen, the millions have been demonstrating completely unarmed in a place where everybody is armed.
And nobody is asking. So what I'm agreeing with you on is that you cannot have a revolution. You cannot start a revolution or start an undertaking like that and then call on imperial troops.
No.
From, like you said, from England and America, and imperialism. You call on imperialism to support a revolution. Yeah. Where have you ever heard imperialism supporting democracy?
Well, exactly.
Social democracy?
And what they want the imperialists want, first of all, to firmly seize Libya's wealth, but perhaps most importantly, to station themselves in between the revolutionary Tunisia and revolutionary Egypt above all, and to use their presence, huge military presence, which they will have if this enterprise triumphs, to be a dagger at the heart of the Egyptian revolution, to make sure that it doesn't get out of hand from their point of view, to make sure that it doesn't threaten Israel, that it doesn't threaten the other potentates in the rest of the Arab world, don't you think?
I think so. I agree with you. And before I get off, I just want to express my dismay over, I love democracy now. I love Amy Goodman, but I think somehow or the other, they have just taken up they just took up the flag of the rest of the media against in support of imperial intervention in Libya,
Yeah.
and you have bombing with all kinds of sophisticated weapons from the air, and apparently these bombings don't cause any damage, any civilian casualties. You hardly hear about civilian casualties.
And if anyone who believes that will believe anything, and it is surprising that some liberals appear to believe it. But the longer it goes on, the more threadbare the whole enterprise becomes. What's happening now, apart from anything else, is completely illegal. It is completely out with the terms of the United Nations Security Council resolution, creating a no-fly zone and creating the right to intervene to protect civilians from regime forces. This is an all-out murderous assault on the capital, Tripoli. They're killing at will in the hope that one day one bomb will land on top of the heads of the regime and that will be the end of the enterprise. And if that doesn't happen sometime soon, then there are definitely members of this coalition of the killing that will be ready to actually invade with their own forces. Shaukat, thanks very much from New Jersey for calling the show. This is the mother of all talk shows with me, George Galloway. I'm back. I'm firing on all cylinders, but I need your telephone calls. Ife, who do we have?
Ishmael from New York.
Ishmael, welcome, my friend. Ishmael, you must turn your radio down so we can all hear you.
Thank you. You mentioned Bosnia, and I want to remind many people that something bad happened to us on 7/11 with Ratko Mladic, who killed about 8,000 Muslim innocent men and women.
Yes.
And many of American media, Fox, Channel Fox and others, didn't even mention that this criminal who killed, raped, and brutalized many Muslims after 15 years of being in Serbia was arrested finally and will face justice. Many of American media didn't say nothing about it, like it didn't even happen. And this is a modern war of camera and the news. We were slaughtered, and the whole world was watching, I guess, because we didn't happen to have oil.
Well, you know, you've taken the words right out of my mouth because, Ismail, if you look at the record in the British Parliament, which is called Hansard, Hansard, you can read this speech that I gave at the time online. And there I said, it's only blood and tears that are flowing in Srebrenica. Unfortunately for them, there's no oil flowing. And if there was, then the response of the European Union and the neighbors would have been very, very different. So I'm also very glad that Mladic has been captured and is in front of the Hague. I hope that he, after a trial, is dealt with in an exemplary fashion. I believe that he is indeed a mass murderer. However, I just add this point. He's not nearly as big a mass murderer as George W. Bush or Tony Blair. And I'm asking myself, how come it's only these little tin pot tyrants that end up in the Hague? When are the big criminals, the big killers, the people who killed not 8,000 men in Srebrenica, but who killed 1 million men, women and children in Iraq, and who've killed untold scores of thousands in Afghanistan this week alone, bringing down death and destruction on people's houses, killing women and children by the dozen. It's the hypocrisy of the so-called international community that really turns my stomach. I don't know where you stand on that, Ismail.
I mean, I live in this country, and it's not easy to be Muslim. You get visited by different agency just because maybe you have a beer or you practice Islam. And I think the only place that I can hear that people express themselves is WBAI. And I'm donating as much as I can. I'm a member, and I'm very happy that you're on this show. I listened to you before through the satellite channels, and I'm very happy that we can hear you in New York. And God bless you and BAI, and freedom will come one day for all. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Assalamu alaikum. Ife, who do we have?
You have
Hello,
Wayne.
Ife?
Wayne from Brooklyn.
Wayne in Brooklyn. Wayne, welcome to the show, my friend.
All right, thank you for accepting the call, Brother George.
Not at all. Nice to hear from you, brother. Go ahead.
You say U.S. politics is just another horse and pony show with Sarah Palin. Our votes don't make a difference. We had 2 Bushes elected or selected as presidents. None of them ever win an election. So votes don't really count.
What happened to the first one? I know that the second one cheated both times, but what about the first one? Is that really true that George Bush didn't win the election?
Oh, yeah, it's true. Just like his son. Remember
Barack Obama won the
connection.
election. Barack Obama won the election because an unprecedentedly large number of new voters, young voters, minority ethnic voters, and progressive voters got behind his campaign. He won a stupendous victory, and he's let us all down.
Well, if you want to believe that, then go right ahead, but hey.
Well, I do believe it, because the alternative is to believe that we have a kind of Manchurian candidate electorate of hundreds of millions of people who are going around as zombies, not in control of their right hands with which they're putting X's on ballot papers or punching the machines or however you do it in your part of the United States. And I just don't believe that. That's just too fanciful for me.
Oh, I understand. Anyway, what you said about Libya, right? You know, about AFRICOM trying to get their inroads. How come the rebel leader left D.C. 2 days before, and the day after this thing supposedly broke out, they got the support of America and Britain and all these other countries?
Well, they did. Actually, Britain was in the lead, and France was even probably ahead of Britain. For once, the United States showed quite a bit of reluctance to get involved in this conflict, and even now they are by no means the lead edge of the conflict. And one of the reasons is they're really not entirely sure who these Johnnies in Benghazi are, and they have the experience, of course, of helping people into power in Afghanistan, who turned out to be, well, not quite 100 annas to the rupee, if you know what I mean.
No, I know what you mean, but remember, these people were selected by the CIA long before they were put in power. This alliance. And Bin Laden. You spoke about Bin Laden before. You're happy that they got him and took him out.
I was happy, yes, I was. I was happy that they got him.
But tell me this. Bin Laden was not a gardener. Who planted the explosives that brought down those buildings in New York?
Well, you see, I just don't buy this story. I don't see why you would need explosives in a building when you were flying 2 airliners into it.
We saw 3 come down in the same speedy fashion.
Yeah, that's a different matter. You did mention the Twin Towers, and you said that there were explosives in the building. And I'm asking you, why would you need to put explosives in a building that you were going to fly 2 airliners into?
Because airlines will not bring down the buildings in that fashion.
Well, it would be,
you are very experienced,
but if it was the intention of the state, which is what you're implying, to create a casus belli for war and the destruction of American civil liberties, I really think that 2 airliners flying into 2 buildings, whether or not they fell down, would be more than enough casus belli, don't you think?
No.
Well, we'll just have to agree to differ on that one, my friend, but thanks for coming through. Anyway, you see, the problem with these conspiracy theories, so far as elections are concerned, is that they act as a demobilizer, a demotivator for people to actually use the power that they have to change things. Because if you say that you can change nothing, that the powerful are all powerful, and that we are destined, doomed, to live under their tutelage forever, then, well, you're kind of doing their job for them, aren't you? At least that's my point of view. I'm ready to argue with yours. Ife, do we have another?
Yes, you have Alex from the Bronx.
Alex in the Bronx. Welcome to the show, my friend.
How you doing? Good morning, sir.
Good morning to you, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, my question to you is that how is it that when, President Obama, he left to go to Ireland and, all over the place, that Benjamin Netanyahu steps into Congress and he addresses Congress? I mean, is there any other foreign leader could do something like that? I mean, look.
Well, I must tell you.
Right. He waits till the president leaves the country and then
No, the dates were already fixed. The Congress is responsible for the invitation to Netanyahu, not the president. But it was a sight that few of us in the world have ever seen the likes of, and it is a sight that no other country in the world could conceive of. You had hundreds of senators and congresspeople rising over and over and over again to their feet in standing ovation for a foreign leader who was boasting about his international crimes, boasting about the extent to which he and the state that he represents have defied international law decade after decade after decade. And the more boastful and messianic he became, the more the paroxysm, this rapture, if I may use the term, amongst the Congress appeared to grow. And I remember tweeting at the end of the speech that I wonder how Americans think this looked to the rest of the world. I wonder how Americans think this looked, in particular, to the 1.7 billion Muslims in the world. Does the United States not have enough trouble with the Muslims in the world? Does it not have enough trouble in the world already without its Congress behaving like a kind of, well, it was kind of insane. It was like, it was crazed. It was like mass hysteria. I never in my life saw anything like it.
Well, that's exactly my point. I never saw nothing like that, you know, and the whole thing about it is that I never seen no other foreign leaders step into Congress and did something like that, you know, and the way he portrayed himself, he's like, you know, it shows you how the United States of America is really in ties with Israel, and it shows us, the people, man, look at what's really going on here when you look at it, you know?
Yes, but it's odd, isn't it? Because General Petraeus, who might well, mark my words, be the Republican nominee for president when it comes, General Petraeus described the United States' special relationship with Israel, and I'm quoting him directly, as a strategic liability. So at the very top of the United States, people know that this is a serious problem that the United States has of being so completely culpable, so inextricably entwined, so ineluctably enjoined with the state of Israel and all its crimes that the United States gets the hatred in the world for so doing. And I just don't understand that disjunction. And I'm guessing that the senators and the congresspeople are on the run from pro-Israel money. I don't mean Jewish money, because the vast majority of supporters of Israel in the United States are, of course, not Jews at all, but crazed fundamentalist Christians. And I'm guessing that they're afraid of the electoral and financial power of that pro-Israel lobby in the United States. But other people can talk me out of that if they call me. Ife, who do we have?
Coming up next, you have Lance from Bergenfield, New Jersey.
Lance in New Jersey. Very nice to hear from you, friend. Go ahead.
Yeah, just listening to you talk about elections and election fixing and stuff like that. I couldn't agree with you more that conspiracies like that just demoralize the public into not voting. But part of the
they do really. In fact, so much so, my friend, that you wonder who started these conspiracy theories in the first place, because they certainly suit the interests of the already rich and powerful.
Well, and part of the evidence is that it takes us a year and a half to figure out who we're going to vote for, and a year and a half of marketing and advertisements and, you know, hot air balloon candidates like, you know, Donald Trump and quite frankly, Sarah Palin, who I don't think has any chance of voting, but her purpose is just to kind of stir the pot and keep the people that support her online so that, you know, when it's time for them to endorse another candidate, they all march along with her, you know? So
yeah. You can't fool all of the people some of the time.
Yeah, exactly. I'm kind of curious your impressions of American, I don't know, what is it, a year and a half long season of electioneering from a country where, what is it, 6 weeks you take to elect?
I find it fascinating that, having been an elected politician 5 times in the British Parliament, nearly 25 years I spent there, served there, I usually say, like Nelson Mandela served 27 years in Robben Island. I served 25 years in the British Parliament, which had its moments, but its terrible half hours. But one of the many, many differences between your system and ours is the question of money. In order to be elected to the British Parliament, I had a strict limit on the amount of money that I could spend. It was so strict that it really didn't become an issue how you raised it, because it was peanuts. It was probably something like $15,000. That was the maximum that I could spend on my election, and the same for all my other opponents. So when you keep spending limits tight, you do take the money largely out of politics, not entirely, and that seems to me the proper way that you ought to go. Instead of allowing the expenses of the presidency and the presidential election to balloon over and over, and now it's going to be the first billion-dollar presidential race next time, then you really, and then worry about how the money was raised, you need to put a very, very tight ceiling, I think, on the spending on politics. What do you think, Lance?
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Part of the reason that that people get so frustrated, I think part of the reason that no one votes is because they've been, propagandized for a year and a half over who to vote for, and by the time the election comes, you feel like, what's even the point?
And quite often it's two cheeks of the same backside that you're being asked to choose from amongst. Though that, of course, wasn't true last time. We'll see if it's true next time. Lance, thanks for the call, my friend.
Yeah.
Aoife, do we have another?
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes, you have KJ from Queens.
KJ in Queens. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Good morning, George. It's a pleasure to have you back on the airwaves again.
I'm so happy to be back. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I just wanted to say I appreciate your point of view, certainly on the Middle East question and some of the insights you bring regarding, European ventures and American ventures in Africa and Third World, but mostly Africa and Middle East. However, I know that you go a little bit on the Bud Light side when it comes to that question of conspiracy and 9/11. I'm not trying to convince you, nor do I wish to have a discussion about it. Simply to say that it is uniquely American in the psyche of Americans to address that question as a matter of getting to a truth, because for many of us, the hypocrisy of that must be exposed. And we won't go into mechanics of it, mechanics of the election as you wish to describe. People are not dismayed by the idea of having to vote. People will come out and vote. But the underlying understanding they're seeking is to understand what our government stands for. And when people feel that their government will commit such atrocities here and abroad, they will dispel those characters out of Congress who are essentially prostitutes. So that's my point of reference I want to make with you.
Well, sure. It's all just a bit far-fetched for me, because the price of it being exposed would be terminal. And it wouldn't just be the end of the Bush dynasty. It wouldn't just be the end of the Republican Party. It would be the end of the American Republic.
Exactly.
If it were exposed that the state had murdered 3,000 of its own people by flying 2 airliners into 2 buildings and exploding others, including those 2 buildings. So it would have to be quite a dramatic gamble. And it's not that I think that George Bush isn't wicked enough to do such a thing, or even that I think he's too stupid to have done such a thing, because others, of course, could have done it on his behalf. What I'm questioning is from a purely rational and logical point of view. It was a completely unnecessary, over-the-top gamble for no necessary purpose. If the United States right wanted to create a casus belli for war against Muslim countries abroad, they could have found one far, far more cheaply and less risky, without risking the very existence of the Republic itself. And you'll never persuade me otherwise.
I'm not
but thanks for the call.
George, if I may for a minute.
Go on, yeah.
I'm not trying to persuade you, but that the issue of the terrorism goes beyond a Muslim demographic. It goes beyond a region. It allows the myth of an unhidden boogeyman that has to be chased wherever that name terrorism arises. It is an ideological framework for war and continual war. So but
it didn't work, did it? But let's agree to differ on that first point. I'll deal with the second.
And I do.
But brother, let's deal with the second point. It didn't work then, did it? Because, in fact, the war which was launched against Iraq, which had as one of its three purposes to terrorize the world with American power, actually achieved the opposite. Now the whole of the Middle East, from Marrakesh to Bahrain, is in flames. Tyrants are being overthrown. The American power was shown in its limitations, not in its abundance. And the United States economy is not just on the floor, but according to the housing statistics I just read this morning, actually falling through the floor. So it hasn't helped the United States in any way at all.
It's not a rational outcome, but it's not that they didn't control. They had 30 years of practice, George. That's where I differ with you. The same body that's been in position after Kennedy, are the same ideological framework of neocons that have moved this country in this direction. It's
failed, no?
It is irrational.
But it's failed, yeah? Do we agree it's failed? Do we agree that the United States power...
That's why the Tea Party and the mobilization of the rich behind the ideological framework domestically is so key. If we buy into election, elect who's going to run for next year's election, then we'll fall into the slot of advertising, what they'll give us for the election for the moment. And if we just fall into that trap, then we lose sight of the content of the whole framework is dissipating, that we need to address this in a broader way, that we have to look and seek a shift in the paradigm. That's it, George. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the call. It's all happening here on the mother of all talk shows.
Hello, Tony Blair here, just dashing off to pick up a check and sort out the Middle East problem. But I thought I'd just give a quick plug to the special relationship between me and George Galloway. I can't stand the man.
And the feeling is entirely mutual. He is, of course, the peace envoy to the Middle East. He's doing a great job, isn't he? Ife, any calls?
Yes, returning is Lincoln from New York.
Lincoln in New York. Very nice to hear from you, friend.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Yeah, two things I want to address. I want to address the Libya situation, and I also want to address your disappointment and many other people's disappointment with Obama. First, Libya. I think there's been a caricature of the Libya situation. First of all, it's not totally true that Gaddafi is this horrible man they make him out to be. We have to put him in historical context. Gaddafi, when he liberated Libya in 1969, he was from the West, and he was supported greatly by the people from the West. And so, wrong or rightly so, he actually treated the people of the west of Libya better than the people from the east.
He did, that's right.
The rebellion against Gaddafi was not really the majority of the people turning against Gaddafi, because the USA does not really have a good standing with Gaddafi, knowing that he's like really an independent thinker to a degree. I mean, when he actually went along with them recently, it was really for survival. It wasn't because he really wanted to, because you remember back in 1986 or 85, they had bombed him and killed one of his children. So he didn't have no great love for the West, for England or these places. Now, the CIA, actually knowing that the East did not support him and that he did not treat the East good, they fomented a rebellion against Gaddafi. So it wasn't really like the rebellion in Tunisia or in.
But Egypt. Why would you need to ferment a rebellion in Libya when there's rebellions in virtually every Arab country? There's no need to imagine that someone needs to ferment it.
It was for the purpose of destabilization. It was for the purpose of overthrowing his government. I was born in Jamaica, and they did the same thing down there. When Michael
Sure they did. Sure they did, brother. But listen to me. I know Libya very well. I know the Arab world very well. And what you said is absolutely correct, that the Libyan leader's stronghold was in the west of the country, in Tripoli and in the southwest of the country. However, Misrata, which has been now under siege since the very beginning of this conflict and cannot be conquered by Gaddafi's forces despite all their efforts, is in the west of the country. There are many manifestations of rebellion in the west of the country, including in Tripoli itself and in the mountains near to the Tunisian border. These are all on the west side of the country. So up to a point, you're absolutely correct. But listen, Gaddafi is not so much an original thinker, an independent thinker, as stark raving mad. This is a man who has wasted untold billions of dollars on absurd, grandiose, grandiloquent projects. He has given away billions of dollars, entirely wastefully for the most part. He has fantasized one day about being a leader in the Arab world, the next day a leader of the hinterland of Africa, imagining that Libya on the Mediterranean coast could somehow be central to life and developments in Africa proper, in the continent as a whole. These are all fantasies for which the Libyan people have paid very, very dearly. I don't know if you've been there. If you've been there, you'll know. There are many, many streets in the main towns and cities that don't even have street lights. There are potholes like caves that a Chilean miner could get lost in every highway, in every street, in every city and town in Libya. Libyan people go abroad to get health care because there aren't decent hospitals in Libya. So we have to face this fact that Gaddafi, who posed as a revolutionary for most of the 42 years that he's been in power, then sold everything to the imperialists, and it still was not enough. There's reason enough, objective reason enough, to want the overthrow of Gaddafi. And I'm convinced that the majority of Libyans want the overthrow of Gaddafi. But I'm equally convinced that they have no right to demand the invasion of their country by mine, the expenditure of blood and treasure by my country and yours, in order to bring about their revolution, which would in any case thereby be stillborn. It would be born entirely mutated as a creature of imperialism.
I would want to, if I had more time, I'd go further on that. Another time I'll call you back on that. But I just want to say something about the Obama situation. You see, many people are disappointed with Obama because they weren't really listening to him during the elections. First of all, concerning Cuba, Obama said that he would allow visitation, but he would not lift the embargo. Any progressive person, and knowing the history of Cuba, and knowing that the embargo was wrong, would have said that they were going to lift the embargo. So that alone should tell you that Obama, what kind of change Obama.
Yeah, but Lincoln, elections are about choosing.
Let me finish making my point. The next thing is, during the confirmation hearing, when I stayed home and I listened to the confirmation hearing for Condoleezza Rice, and I was amazed when it came to Obama's turn. He voted for Condoleezza Rice, and that went over everyone's head. I was amazed when I hear this man talk about change and voting for Condoleezza Rice.
Lincoln, we're running out of time. Lincoln, we're running out of time, so I've got to make this point. The people of the United States did not vote for you, Lincoln, or for me, George Galloway, to be President of the United States. If they had, then they would have got something different. But they voted for Barack Obama as opposed to John McCain. Elections are about choosing, oftentimes, between the two cheeks of the same backside. Sometimes one cheek of a backside is marginally less worse, less bad, than the other cheek of the backside. That's what bourgeois elections in capitalist countries inevitably come down to. Now, if we haven't yet won the majority of people in the United States to a more progressive prospectus that you and I would advocate, well, that's our fault. It's not Obama's fault, and it's not the people's fault. We can't abolish the people and elect a new one. Lincoln, I've got to leave it there. Aoife, do we have time for a couple more calls?
Yes, you have Richard, actually, from New Jersey City, from Jersey City.
Richard in New Jersey, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hi, George. How are you?
I'm good. Very glad to hear from you.
Listen, George, I'd like to talk about Syria for a moment. And 2 points on it. First, the American hypocrisy through the State Department and Barack Obama on statements regarding Syria, and what you see emerging if Syria were to become a democratic country. And I'll just listen.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that a democratic country is what it will become if the people who are trying to lead the revolution have their way. First of all, one of the leaders of their rebellion is a man called Saddam, who's now based in the United States and France, and who was the vice president of Syria for almost 30 years. And in that 30 years, he and his family became wealthy beyond the dreams of avarice, from looting the national treasury and corruptly dealing everywhere that they could on their own behalf, and of course are fully involved and culpable in all the crimes that were committed over the 30 years by the regime in Damascus. So if Saddam becomes the leader, as he certainly intends to, it will not be a democratic Syria that we will have. Secondly, if the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria, and the Muslim Brotherhood are different in every country, have their way, then I don't think that it will be a democracy that will emerge. But we don't have a democracy in Syria now. So in that sense, you could say, what will change? Well, here's my point. I don't know why the Syrian regime persists in believing that opening fire on demonstrators with live ammunition is going to solve their problem. Have they never heard of tear gas? Have they never heard of water? Have they never heard of even rubber bullets? And in any case, whatever they deploy will not solve their problem. That can only be solved by dialogue with the decent majority of those who are up in arms, in some cases literally against the regime in Damascus. There are three main problems with the regime in Damascus. Number one, the level of corruption amongst the comprador of the Syrian leadership is staggering and eye-watering to behold. Relatives and friends of the president have become some of the richest men in the world. And the public in Syria are entitled to be extremely angry about that. The second is the aspects of a police state which imbue every police state that there has ever been in history. The police, the secret police, the security services, the intelligence services become the real rulers of the country. And even where, as I believe is the case in Syria, the leader, Bashar al-Assad, would like to make reforms, he finds that those reforms are all the while blocked, and at every turn blocked, and even subverted by the police state apparatus. And the third question is the need for representative government, a multi-party system in Syria, which we need to encourage the Syrian regime to bring about. But my last point is this, and it's probably the one that you're waiting for, whatever your own point of view. The idea that the Syrian regime is like the other Arab dictatorships is wrong, because Syria is being targeted for conspiracy, not because of the bad things that Syria has done, but because of the good things. Its support for the liberation movement in Palestine, its support for the liberation movement in Lebanon, its refusal to give up its territory stolen by Israel, its refusal to allow its country to be used as a base by imperialism for the invasion and occupation of Iraq. These national stands of the Syrian regime are why Washington and London hate them. Not because they're not democratic enough, or because their ruling family is looting the treasury. Because we like countries like that. We like brutal dictatorships whose dictators loot their country, as long as they serve the interests of imperialism. and Bashar al-Assad does not do that. It's been marvelous for me. I hope it was for you, and if it was, join me again next week at the same time on WBAI for the mother of all talk shows.
Joy of resistance. We're sisters of the joy of resistance.
In cases of rape, why is the character of the victim always on trial? This issue has surfaced again as 2 rape cases unfold in New York City. One involves the former head of the IMF and an African immigrant hotel worker. The other, last week's acquittal of 2 New York City police officers on rape charges. On Wednesday, June 1st, 9 to 10 p.m., join the Joy of Resistance as we look at these cases and what they mean. With Priscilla Gonzalez, Director of Domestic Workers United, Kathy Scarborough, an organizer of the International Feminist Solidarity Statement on Rape, Judith Ezekiel, a teacher at the University of Toulouse in France, and an organizer of last Friday's fierce anti-rape demonstrations on the streets of New York. On the phones, we'll welcome your stories of sexual harassment and assault on the job. That's Wednesday, Joy of Resistance, 9 to 10 p.m., June 1st, because together we are powerful.
Our existence.
The Clearwater Festival in Westchester joins you in supporting WBAI. This year's festival is on June 19 and 20 and features hundreds of artists, including Pete Seeger, the Indigo Girls, Martin Sexton, Josh Ritter, The Low Anthem, Dar Williams, and many more. Full lineup and tickets at clearwaterfestival.org.
Gil Scott-Heron with Me and the Devil from his last album, I'm New Here. Faye on your radio, right here on your listener-supported commercial-free radio station, WBAI New York, 99.5 FM. Coming up next at 10 a.m. is Damn Good Music with Mike Sargent, so stay tuned for that, followed by The Gary Knoll Show with Gary Knoll at noon. And it's currently partly cloudy outside, but it feels like a nice 76 degrees, and today scattered strong storms. And a high of 86 degrees, and tonight isolated thunderstorms with a low of 64 degrees. So hopefully you was not like me and forgot your umbrella at home. So hopefully you brought your umbrella with you today. And tomorrow, really bright and sunny and beautiful with a high of 78 degrees. As I said, coming up at 10 a.m. is Damn Good Music with Mike Sargent right here on your listener-supported radio station, WBAI 99.5 FM.
On Saturday, June 4th, come to a support rally for Bradley Manning, hero whistleblower, who has been jailed for 1 year, tortured at Quantico Prison, and transferred to Fort Leavenworth, awaiting military court-martial. Our demand is to free Bradley, because blowing the whistle on war crimes is not a crime. Saturday, June 4th, Times Square Recruitment Center at 12:30, 44th and Broadway. For more information, visit worldcan'twait.net or call 866-973-4463. That's 866-973-4463.
Hi, I'm Danny Glover.
This is Saul Williams.
And this is Michael Frank from Spearhead. And this is WBAI, listener-supported, non-commercial radio in New York.
This is Reverend Jesse Jackson of the Rainbow Push Coalition. Please call and support WBAI, non-commercial peace and justice radio in New York.
People moving out, people moving in. Why? Because of the color of...
Please remember that this program is supported by the listener members of WBAI New York. If you like what you hear, please consider becoming a member of WBAI or renewing if you've already joined. Basic membership is $25, but we accept any amount. Help us keep free speech alive.